My name's Daniel Whitaker. I'm 35, a foreman for a construction outfit based out of Fort Collins, Colorado. I'd been married to Emily for nearly 9 years. She was sharp, career-focused, worked in environmental consulting. And when we met on a job site in San Diego, she had this calm, magnetic way of looking at you like nothing else mattered in that moment. I fell fast, maybe too fast, but for years, it felt real, solid, until it didn't. We'd driven up to Bozeman, Montana for a long weekend wedding, her cousins, supposed to be a small road trip, Emily, me, and her sisters, Lacey and Brooke, in her SUV, splitting gas and motel costs. The three of them had always been tight, like a triangle no one could squeeze into. Even when we were dating, I could feel the edge of their bond, their inside jokes, subtle eye rolls, how they'd swap stories and glances I wasn't invited into. But love makes you hope. It makes you think you'll win them over with time and consistency. That was my mistake. I ignored the signs. On the ride up, something felt off. Emily kept whispering with her sisters. Those sideways glances in the rearview mirror. Chuckles under their breath that died when I asked what was funny. Nothing. Dead on a rush. She'd say, smiling too big. Just girl talk. But my gut knew better. We stopped at a gas station just outside of Livingston. I went in for coffee, came back out to see the engine running. The three of them in the car, like they were waiting for a countdown. Emily rolled down her window, her smile strange and rehearsed. We've been talking, she said, and we think you need a little time to figure things out for yourself. I thought she was joking. What the hell does that mean? I asked. Then Lacey chimed in from the back. You've gotten too dependent. Like warning. Emotionally, Brooke added, you need a little independence and adventure. I stood there holding keys I thought were to our car, but they were just house keys. My truck was back in Fort Collins, parked in our garage. My phone, wallet, a thin fall jacket. That's all I had. Emily. Don't do this, I said, walking toward the passenger door, but she just stared ahead, then hit the gas. Tires squealed, and in seconds, they were gone. Taillights shrinking into the Montana dusk. I stood there, stunned, not angry, not yet, just confused. Like maybe this was a twisted birthday surprise and they'd loop back around. But the minutes passed, then an hour. I tried calling Emily, straight to voicemail. Lacey and Brooke. Blocked. What's someone? I went back inside and asked the gas station clerk about a bus to Fort Collins. No buses here, he said. Closest depot's in Bozeman. 40 miles. 40 miles. With no ride. No backup. Just a bad cup of gas station coffee and the smell of snow in the air. That night, I slept behind the building under a metal overhang, using my jacket as a pillow. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the dark sky and tried to piece together how a marriage I believed in had soured into whatever this was. The next morning, I hitched a ride with a retired trucker named Glenn who dropped me at the Bozeman Greyhound station. I had just enough in my account to cover a ticket. 14 hours on that bus gave me nothing but time. Time to think about the years I'd spent trying to be the good husband, the one who paid bills on time, who fixed cabinets, who showed up for family birthdays. I thought that counted for something. But on that cold vinyl seat, somewhere outside Casper, I realized something devastating. Emily didn't love me anymore, at least not in a way that involved respect. This wasn't a lesson. It was a message. One loud, cruel message that said, you're not one of us and you never were. And the more I look back, all the ignored anniversaries, the spontaneous canceled plans because Lacey needed sister time, the smirks Brooke gave me when I offered to help with her car or move her furniture, the more it made sense. This wasn't new. It had been building. I just refused to see it. When I got home, the house was dark, no car in the driveway. I sat on the edge of our bed for hours, phone in hand, waiting for some explanation. None came. The next morning, I called in sick and did something I'd never done before. I opened her laptop, not to invade her privacy, but because I was desperate to understand what just happened. I found what I wasn't prepared for. Message threads, group chats, screenshots of our texts, mocking captions under candid photos of me. There were plans, details, jokes. Let's leave him somewhere remote. Lacey had typed, See how long it takes for Captain Clingy to find his way back. Emily's reply. You two are terrible. But yeah, could be hilarious. Hilarious. That was the word that broke something inside me. All those times I swallowed my discomfort to keep the peace. All those family dinners where I smiled while they mocked me in code. It hadn't been love. It had been control dressed up in commitment. So I packed a bag and left. No note. Ixifon. No locked doors. Just the same silence they gave me. I drove to my brother Matt's apartment in Colorado Springs. He didn't ask why I showed up. Just handed me a beer and said, spare room's yours if you need it. That night, as I laid on his pull-out couch, one thought burned through my mind. They didn't want to teach me independence. They wanted to humiliate me. And they had to awanawi to shura one. But that was only the beginning of what they'd lose. I didn't contact Emily. I didn't tell her where I was. In fact, I turned my phone off completely for a week. That silence, the very thing they claimed I couldn't handle, became the most powerful thing I owned. It felt strange at first. No texts, no half-hearted what's for dinner messages, no calendar reminders for events I never signed up for. Just space, time, and quiet. But peace doesn't last long when people are invested in maintaining their story. When I finally turned my phone back on, there were 6 missed calls from unknown numbers. Voicemails, as most of them variations of the same line. Dan, you're overreacting. It was just a joke. We were trying to help you grow. Not one apology. Not one acknowledgement of the pain they caused. Emily's voice was especially hollow, like she was checking a box. You can't just walk out. Sten Sherwin, that's not how adults solve problems. We need to talk this through. But she never said I'm sorry. Never said I was wrong. That told me everything. So I blocked the numbers. Changed my own a day later. It wasn't just a break from Emily and her sisters. It was a clean fracture from the version of me that needed their approval. Matt Titiyawanon, my brother, Nirinonons, was a man of few words. But one night, after I'd told him everything, from the prank to the messages I'd found on her laptop, he looked at me and said, you were married to someone who didn't like you. That's the hardest truth, but it's also the one that sets you free. I started sleeping through the night again, woke up without dread in my chest, and slowly, I remembered how to breathe without asking permission. I transferred to a local project in the Springs, a hospital renovation short on crew leads. The work was physical, grounding, familiar. No one cared what had happened in Montana. They just cared that I showed up, did my job, and didn't cut corners. For the first time in years, my life was mine. I got my own apartment, nothing fancy, just a 1-bedroom with old plumbing and a view of the back lot. But it was mine. No debates over paint color, no arguments about whether we needed a new espresso machine. I ate when I was hungry, slept when I was tired, watched old war documentaries without someone asking if I was going to be a grandpa already. It was quiet, but not lonely. And in that quiet, I started remembering the version of me I liked. Not the one who tried to be everything to everyone. Not the one who laughed at jokes made at his expense to keep the peace. But the one who built things with his hands. Who meant what he said. Who knew how to take care of others. And finally, himself. A month passed. Then another. And just when I thought maybe the story had finally closed, my mother called. Emily had shown up at her house. She cried on the porch. Told Mom that I was having some kind of breakdown. That I'd disconnected from reality. She played the victim, the worried wife with no answers. And to my mother, who'd always liked Emily for her organization, her steady career, her put-togetherness, it sounded believable. I tried to explain. I told her about the abandonment, the messages, the way Emily and her sisters had laughed while planning to leave me in the middle of nowhere. But as I spoke, I realized how insane it all sounded. She left you as a prank, and you just, left. That's what people heard. That's what they believed. Because it was easier than the truth. Easier than admitting that 3 grown women could coordinate something so callous for sport. Emily didn't want me back. She wanted control back. She wanted to be the one who left, not the one left behind. I went to my friend Jake's place that weekend. We'd worked together on and off for 5 years. And he'd been at my wedding. Heard you and Emily split. He said when I walked in, sorry. Menanar Surum. She looked pretty shaken when I saw her. There it was again. Her version, the one she'd spread like perfume, subtle, clinging, and hard to wash off. So I told him the truth. From the first signs of isolation to that gas station in Montana. He listened, nodded slowly, then said something I'll never forget. Man, at your wedding, you were joking with some of the guys. Emily walked over every time you started having fun. Thought she was just trying to keep the timeline running smooth. But now I think she just didn't like seeing you happy without her. That hit like a punch I didn't see coming, and it made something click. Emily didn't want a partner. She wanted a project, and I was supposed to be the man who didn't wander too far from her leash. A week later, I hired an attorney. Her name was Margaret Faulkner, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and a voice that could shatter glass. I gave her everything, the screenshots, the voicemails, the photos from that night in Montana where Emily and her sisters were smiling, doing shots at a bar labeled Freedom Weekend. They're saying you abandoned her, Margaret said, claiming emotional instability, trying to tilt asset division in her favor. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. After that, exactly, she said. They made a mistake. They posted too much, said too much. That's going to hurt them. I signed the divorce papers that afternoon. Margaret would handle the filing, the negotiations, the court date. All I had to do was stay quiet and start over. The court date was set for early March. Snow still dusted the edge of the Rockies, and I was wearing the same Navy suit I'd gotten married in nearly a decade earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. The sleeves still fit, but everything else had changed. Across the courtroom sat Emily, dressed in charcoal gray with her new attorney, a young guy in designer glasses who looked like he billed in 6-minute increments. She gave me this look like we were old friends accidentally reunited, like we'd simply grown apart and needed to have a conversation. I didn't look back. Her attorney opened with confidence, claimed I'd abandoned the marriage, walked out without warning, refused therapy. He painted me as emotionally immature, overwhelmed by life's pressures, unable to handle adult responsibilities. Your Honor, he said smoothly, this wasn't a divorce born from betrayal. It was a reaction, irrational and abrupt, to a misunderstanding between family members. Margaret stood without missing a beat. Your Honor, Serena, she said, her voice even and lethal. I'd like to submit documentation that contradicts the petitioner's claims. One by one, she laid out the receipts, screenshots of the group chats, photos from the girls' weekend at the bar in Bozeman, time-stamped hours after they'd abandoned me, captions that read, freedom never felt so good. No more Mr. Sad eyes, Let's see how long it takes him to find his way home. The courtroom went silent. Even the judge leaned closer. Margaret didn't gloat. She didn't grandstand. She just kept delivering the truth like nails in a coffin. Furthermore, we have records of continued harassment after Mr. Whitaker requested no contact, calls to his family, visits to his place of employment, messages from burner numbers. Emily shrank in her seat. Her attorney shuffled papers. And for the first time in years, I felt like someone was finally standing up for me. Like I mattered. The judge reviewed the evidence. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was clear. The court finds no evidence of abandonment or emotional instability by the respondent. Divorce is granted. Assets will be divided evenly. No spousal support awarded. And just like that, it was over. Emily followed me into the hallway, her heels clicking across the marble like a metronome winding down. Please, she said, voice low. This got out of hand. We never meant to hurt you. It was just supposed to be a joke. A wake-up call. I didn't say anything. Didn't stop walking. She grabbed my arm. You can't just walk away from everything. You did. I said, you just used a different road. Then Margaret stepped between us. Calm and immovable. No contact, she said, holding up the paperwork. It applies here. Too. Emily hesitated, then turned and walked back down the hallway. She didn't look over her shoulder, and I didn't look back. That was the last time I saw her. The next few months were quieter than I expected. Not empty, just still. I spent most of my days on job sites, training new guys, overseeing logistics. We finished the hospital renovation ahead of schedule. I got promoted. Crew lead turned into project manager. I rented a new place, slightly bigger, with a workshop in the back and a porch that caught the morning light. I hung tools on the walls, built shelves from reclaimed wood, taught myself how to cook something besides eggs and chili. And I started taking night classes at the local college. Business management. Not because I needed the credits, but because I'd spent so much of my life reacting to other people's decisions, I wanted to start making my own. One day in late May, I got a message from Matt. Emily's been asking around. Friends who want us, neighbors, looking for details. Stay alert. But I didn't worry. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was aware, and that awareness made me stronger than she'd ever allowed me to be. Summer rolled in, and I launched my own contracting business. Whitaker Construction. Just me, a toolbox, and a used pickup I'd bought from a friend for cheap. First job, fixing a cracked retaining wall behind a retired couple's house. They paid me cash and gave me lemonade. I never felt more successful. Within 6 months, I'd hired Matt full-time. Then Jake. Word spread fast, dependable guys. No shortcuts. They actually care. One night after wrapping a patio project, Jake and I were loading up the truck when he said, "You hear about Emily?" I shrugged. "Not really. She got married again. Guy from her firm. Lasted a year. Rumor is she tried the same control game. He wasn't having it. I didn't ask for more. Didn't need the details. The truth was simple. I didn't care anymore. Her life was her responsibility. And mine was finally mine. That's the thing about starting over. At first, it feels like loss. But one day you look up and realize it was freedom wearing a different outfit. Autumn came early that year. In Colorado Springs, that meant crisp mornings and red gold trees bending in the breeze. Like even nature was exhaling after a long, hard summer. Tidriger was word one. Business was steady. Steady enough that I stopped worrying about what came next. My hands were always busy. My calendar full. My phone no longer a source of dread. One Saturday, I was rebuilding a fence for a widow on the north side of town when Matt showed up with a six-pack and a look I recognized. The "you're not gonna like this" look. He handed me a cold bottle and said, "She showed up again, at Mom and Dad's place this time." I didn't even sigh. What did she say? That she wants closure. That she thinks you're avoiding something. I took a sip, nodded. She's not wrong. I am avoiding something. Her. We stood in silence for a minute, listening to the wind move through the pine trees. Then I said, "You know, the worst part, it wasn't the prank. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was the years before it. The slow erosion. The way I was slowly convinced my needs were less important. That my discomfort was irrational. That I had to earn basic respect in my own home." Matt just said, "Ye win a haber for," and handed me another screw for the drill. That's what brothers are for. The truth is, healing isn't a clean line. It doesn't come with music swells or magical turning points. It comes with boring choices. Like choosing not to respond, choosing not to chase, choosing to build a better life instead of trying to fix a broken one that never respected you in the first place. Over the next year, I rebuilt more than fences. I built structure back into my life. I set boundaries, not dramatic walls, just simple lines in the sand that protected the man I was finally becoming. I stopped over-explaining my decisions. If I said no, it meant no. If someone didn't like it, that was their issue to carry. I dated again, slowly, cautiously, not looking for someone to fill a gap, but someone who understood that love wasn't supposed to be a competition for control. Her name was Alicia. She ran a small plant nursery and knew more about soil acidity than I could ever pretend to. On our second date, she brought her dog and asked more questions than I was used to answering. But she listened, and that's what caught me off guard. She listened. I didn't rush. I didn't fall. I learned there was an And when I told her, months later, the short version of what had happened with Emily, she didn't offer pity. She said, "You didn't deserve that, but it's good you left. Some people never do." And she was right. There's a version of me in another universe who stayed to much one, who forgave too quickly, who tried to pretend the Montana thing was just a one-time mistake. That version probably lost himself completely. But not this one. This one built something new. 3 years after that cold night in the gas station lot, I walked into a community center to give a talk on small business growth and construction. At the end of the session, a man in the back raised his hand and said, "You talk about leadership like it's personal, not just about profit margins." I nodded. Because it is. You can't lead anyone until you've figured out how to stand up for yourself. Business, marriage, family, and it all starts there. Afterward, I packed up my things and walked to my truck. Same old Ford, same worn seat covers, same toolbox in the back, but everything else, Nui inatsuru. Stronger. Isturi konirasun. Lighter. Sometimes I still get asked about Emily. Usually by people who heard the filtered version, the polite version. And I always say the same thing. We weren't right for each other. I just took longer to realize it. The thing about being abandoned is this. It doesn't break you. Not if you let it teach you. It shows you what was never real. It strips away illusion. And it gives you a chance, maybe for the first time, to rebuild on your terms. I don't miss the old life. I don't miss the old house. Or the holidays filled with cold smiles and quiet tension. I don't even miss the version of me who thought love meant endurance. I've learned that love, real love, feels like breathing easier. Not like holding your breath. The best part, that's not a lesson someone gave me. It's one I earned.